Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. I'm talking about the various economic scare tactics out there, like the BRICS, the FDIC, and the housing crash, what lower interest rates mean, how our nation's $35 trillion debt has gone galactic. Then today's guest is a legend. He's a technologist and futurist that tells us about today's promise of graphene in real estate, all today on Get Rich Education. When you want the best real estate and finance info, the modern internet experience limits your free articles access, and it's replete with paywalls, and you've got pop-ups and push notifications and cookies disclaimers. Ugh. At no other time in history has it been more vital to place nice, clean, free content into your hands that actually adds no hype value to your life. See, this is the golden age of quality newsletters, and I write every word of ours myself. It's got a dash of humor, and it's to the point. To get the letter, it couldn't be more simple. Text GRE to 66866, and when you start the free newsletter, you'll also get my 1-hour fast real estate course completely free. It's called the Don't Quit Your Daydream Letter, and it wires your mind for wealth. Make sure you read it. Text GRE to 66866. Text GRE to 66866.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Dunedin, Florida to Dunedin, New Zealand, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold, and you are listening to Get Rich Education, where real estate investing is our major. That's what we're here for, with minors in real estate economics and wealth mindset. You know, as a consumer of this media type, as you are, it's remarkable how often you've probably encountered these de facto scare tactics, like the BRICS are uniting and it will take out the dollar and it's just going to be chaos in the United States. You might know that BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, is the acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Do you know how hard it is to get off the petrodollar, and how hard it is for the BRICS, which is basically more than just those 5 countries, it's dozens of countries, how hard it is for them to agree on anything with things as various as their different economies, and they'll have different customs and currencies. I mean, sheesh, just for you to get yourself and 3 friends all to agree to meet at the same coffee shop at the same time takes like a Herculean effort plus a stroke of luck, and all 4 of you are like-minded. So I wouldn't hold your breath on the dollar hyperinflating to worthlessness, although it should slowly debase. What about the scare tactic of the FDIC is going to implode, and it's going to lead to bank closures and widespread societal panic? Well, the FDIC, which stands for Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, they're the body that backs all of the U.S. bank deposits, including yours, and it's steered by their Systemic Resolution Advisory Committee. Well, there are $9 trillion in bank deposits, and it's backed by only a few $100 billion in FDIC cash, so there aren't nearly enough dollars to back the deposits. So can you trust your money in the bank? That's a prevalent scare tactic. But my gosh, if nothing else, history has shown that the government will step in to backstop almost any crisis, especially a banking-related one, where one failure can have a cascading effect and make other institutions fall. I'm not saying that this is right, but time has proven that the government does and will step in. Or the common scare tactic in our corner of the world, that is the imminent housing price crash. And I define a crash as a loss in value of 20% or more. Do you know how difficult this would be to do anytime soon? Housing demand still outstrips supply. Today's homeowners have loads of protective equity, an all-time high of about $300K, so they're not walking away from their homes. Inflation has baked higher replacement costs into the real estate cake, and now mortgage rates have fallen 1.5% from this cycle's highs, and they are poised to fall further. So a housing price crash is super unlikely. And a new scare tactic for media attention seems to be this proposal by a future presidential hopeful about a tax on unrealized gains. Now, Tom Wheelwright is the tax expert. He's returning to the show with us again soon here, so maybe I'll ask him about it. But a tax on unrealized gains is politically pretty unpopular. It would be a mess to impose, and a lot of others have proposed it in the past as well, and it has not gone anywhere. Plus, tax changes need congressional approval, and we have a divided Congress. There's a small chance that a tax on unrealized gains could come to fruition, but it would be tough. It's probably in the category of just another media scare tactic, much like the BRICS and the shaky FDIC banking structure and a housing price crash. I like to keep you informed about these things, and at times we do have guests with a disparate opinion from mine on these things. It's good to get a diversity of opinions, but it's best not to go too deep into these scare tactics that are really unlikely to happen anytime soon. Well, there was a party going on 10 days ago at what I'll affectionately dub Club Fed in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I don't know what the Club Fed cover charge was, but fortunately we did not have to watch Janet Grandma Yellen dance at Club Fed. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell, yes, he finally caught a rate cut buzz. He announced that the time has come for interest rate cuts, and as usual, he didn't offer specifics. Total rager. What a party. Later this month, he's going to render the long-awaited decision, which now seems to be how much he'll cut rates by, 1/4 point or 1/2 point. Did you know that it's been 4.5 years since the Fed lowered rates? Yeah, that was March of 2020 at the start of the pandemic. And then we know what happened back in 2022 and 2023. They hiked rates so much that they needed trail mix, a sleeping bag, and some Mountain House freeze-dried meals to go along with their steady hiking cycle. Interest rates now, though, have been untouched for over a year. It's been an interesting year for the Fed and rates. Many erroneously thought there would be 6 or more rate cuts this year. And what about MAGA-nomics? Trump recently said that if he becomes president, he should be able to weigh in on Fed decisions. That would depart from a longtime tradition of Fed independence from executive influence. Historically, they've been separated.
The Federal Reserve is a very interesting thing, and it's sort of gotten it wrong a lot. And he's tending to be a little bit late on things. He gets a little bit too early and a little bit too late. And, you know, that's very largely it's a gut feeling. I believe it's really a gut feeling. And I used to have it out with him. I had it out with him a couple of times very strongly. I fought him very hard. And, we get along fine. But I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful. And I think I have a better instinct than, in many cases, people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
Those Trump remarks were just a few weeks ago, and then shortly afterward, he seemed to walk those comments back, but he did say that he would not reappoint DJ J. Powell to the economic turntables. It's a long-standing economic argument as well about whether an outside force like the Fed should set interest rates at all, which is the price of money, rather than allowing the rate to float with the free market as lenders and borrowers negotiate with each other. I mean, no one's out there setting the price of oil or refrigerators or grapes. But it is pretty remarkable that the Fed has signaled that rate cuts are imminent when inflation is still 2.9%, well above their 2% target. But let's be mindful about the Fed's twofold mission, what they call their dual mandate. It is stable prices and maximum employment. Well, the Fed's concern is that second one. It's that the labor market has slowed. And see, the way it works is pretty simple. Lower interest rates boost employment because it's cheaper for businesses to borrow money. That encourages them to expand and hire, which is exactly how lower interest rates help the labor market. That's how more people get hired. And this matters because you need a tenant that can pay the rent. So the bottom line here is to expect lower interest rates on savings accounts, HELOCs, credit cards, and automobile loans. What this means to real estate investors is that lower mortgage rates are imminent, although the change should be slow. 2 years ago, mortgage rates rose faster than they're going to fall. Now, one thing that lower interest rates can do is lower America's own debt servicing costs. And America's public debt is drastic, now between $35 and $36 trillion. In fact, to put our debt into perspective, it has gone galactic, and I mean that in an almost literal sense. Because look, if you line up dollar bills, which are about 6 inches long, if you line those up end to end from Earth, how far do you think that they would reach? How about to the moon? Oh no, if you line up dollars end to end, they would stretch beyond the moon. Okay, let's see how far we can follow them out through the solar system. They would breeze past Mars, which is 140 million miles away. The next planet out, Jupiter, our trail of dollar bills would extend beyond that. Next up is Saturn and its ring. The dollar bills would reach beyond that. We're getting to the outer planets now. Uranus, still going. Neptune. Okay, Neptune is about $30 trillion bills away, and we would have to go beyond that then. So our $35 to $36 trillion of national debt would almost reach Pluto. That's galactic. That's amazing. That's bad. And it probably means we have to print more dollars in order to pay back the debt, which is, of course, long-term inflationary. And I don't know what's stopping us from going from $36 trillion up to, say, $100 trillion. Gosh. Next week here on the show, we're talking about real estate investing in one of the longtime best and still hottest real estate investor states. And then later on, we've got brilliant tax wizard Tom Wheelwright returning. As we know here at GRE, real estate pays 5 ways. And if you have any Spanish-speaking family or friends, I've got a great way for them to consume all 5 video modules. It's an AI converting my voice to Spanish in these videos. We have a Spanish speaker here on staff at Get Rich Education, and she said the dub is pretty good. Well, the entire package, Real Estate Pays 5 Ways en Español, is condensed into a powerful 1 hour total. All 5 videos, a course all in one wealth building hour. It's free to watch. There's no email address to enter or anything. You can tell your Spanish-speaking family and friends, or maybe you're multilingual and your primary language is Spanish. That is it. GetRichEducation.com/Espanol, or a shorter way to get to the same page is GetRichEducation.com/ESP. That's GetRichEducation.com/ESP. This week's guest is one of the first people I ever heard discussing the blockchain and cryptocurrency 15 years ago, and then he was early on AI. What got my attention is his education about a promising construction material for building new real estate, though I expect that our discussion will delve outside of real estate today as well. Let's meet the incomparable George Gilder. This week's guest is the co-founder at the Discovery Institute, discovery.org, original pillar of supply-side economics, former speechwriter to both Presidents Reagan and Nixon, and he's the author of the classic book on economics called Wealth and Poverty. Today, he's at the forefront of technological breakthroughs. He's a Harvard grad. He wears a lot of stripes. I've only mentioned a few. Hey, welcome to GRE, George Gilder.
Great to be here.
It's so good to host you, George. In both your writings and your influences on people like President Reagan, you champion supply-side economics. And I think of supply-side economics as things like lower taxes, less regulation, and free trade. We had someone in the Reagan administration here with us a few months ago, David Stockman. He championed a lot of those same things. But go ahead and tell us more about supply-side economics and what that means and how that's put into practice.
Well, it really begins with human creativity in the image of your creator. Essence of supply-side economics, now superabundance. I mean, supply-side economics triumphed. We had the whole information technology revolution ignited during the Reagan years and now dominates the world economy and gives the United States 7 out of the top 10 companies in market cap. 70% of global corporate market cap is American companies because of supply-side economics.
Amazing.
And that's why it's distressing to see supply-side economics with its promise of superabundance and prosperity and opportunity give way to narrow nationalistic calculations and portents of war. I mean, all these issues are at the forefront today. In time, we're going to see human creativity once again prevail. And my books, Life After Capitalism is my latest book. My new paradigm is graphene. Graphene is a single layer of carbon atoms, two-dimensional layer of carbon atoms that is 200 times stronger than steel, 1,000 times more conductive than copper. It switches in the terahertz, trillions of times a second, rather than the billions of times a second that our current silicon chips switch. And you mix it with concrete, and the concrete comes 35% stronger. Just parts per million of graphene mixed with concrete yields a material that's 35% stronger than ordinary concrete. You mix parts per million of graphene with asphalt, the roads don't get potholes in the winter. It's radically abates. But it conducts signals so accurately. If you go on YouTube, you can find a mouse that's had its spinal cord severed completely, injected with graphene. The spinal signals transmitted so accurately that you see the mouse doing cartwheels by the end of the YouTube measure. I mean, it's material that's going to transform all industries, from real estate to medicine to surgery to electronics. Electronics being kind of the spearhead of our economy. The transformation in electronics may be more significant than any other domain.
Well, this is a terrific overview of all the contributions you're making to both the economic world and the technology world with what you told us about right there. And I do want to ask you some more about the graphene and the technology later. But, if we bring it back to the economics, it was in your classic book, Wealth and Poverty, which sold over 1 million copies, where you espouse a lot of the same things that you still espouse today in your more recent books. That is, capitalism begins with giving. We can often think of it that way as a real estate investor, as where we need to give tenants a clean, safe, affordable, functional property before we profit. Capitalism begins with giving.
Absolutely. That's a crucial debate I had with Ayn Rand, the fountainhead in Atlas Shrugged. And I say capitalism subsists on altruism. I'm concerned for the interests of others. imaginative anticipation of the needs of others. It's an altruistic, generous system. And from that generosity stems the amazing manifestations of superabundance which I've been writing about recently. And superabundance shows, measured by time prices, how many hours a typical worker has to spend to earn the goods and services that sustain his life.
Yeah, that's where the real cost is, the time.
Yeah, time is money. Money is time, tokenized time. And measured by time, economic growth has been 50 to just enormously faster than is estimated by any of the GDP numbers. However, measured by time, government services are ordinary GDP assumes that every dollar of government spending is worth what it costs. Prices both show that progress in the private sector has been 4 or 5 times faster than is estimated by GDP, while time price of government-dominated goods, including increasingly healthcare and education, is way less valuable than the cost. Its value is subtracted. And certainly trillions of dollars for windmills and solar panels, trillions of dollars of subsidies, is a net subtraction of value in the world economy. So I am with Gail Pooley and Tupi, both who wrote a book called Superabundance that I wrote the introduction to, and William Nordhaus, the Nobel laureate from Yale, who really conceived and developed time prices and showed that economic growth is thousands of times greater than has been estimated by ordinary economic data. This is a time of abundance. It's not a time of scarcity. It's not a time of the dismal science. It's the time of superabundance.
Yes, 100%. A lot of that is just the government getting out of the way and really let people be givers, be that go-giver, and lead with giving, because I have never heard of a society that's taxed its way to prosperity.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely the case. And I was talking previously about graphene, which is the great new material that has been discovered over the last a couple decades. It originated, a lot of this science originated in Jim Torr's laboratory, James Torr of Rice University. And he's had scores of companies have emerged from his laboratory, and 18 of them got started in Israel. Israel has really become a leading force in the world economy. And when Israel is in jeopardy, our economy is in jeopardy. We have 100,000 Israeli citizens working in companies in Silicon Valley, 100,000. All the leading American tech companies have outposts in Israel. And now we face what I call the Israel test, which is how you respond to people who are really superior in creativity and accomplishment and intellect. And the appropriate thing to do is emulate them and learn from them. But too many people in the world see success and they want to tear it down, or they think it was stolen from someone else, or it was part of a zero-sum game where the riches of one person necessarily come at the expense of someone else, which is the opposite of the truth. The riches proliferate opportunities for others. That's how the economy grows, through the creativity and the image of your creator.
And when you bring up Israel, they're one of many nations that's made strong contributions to society and the economy. And when we think about other nations, that's been an increasingly relevant conversation these past few years. And a lot of that centers on immigration. I'm not an expert on how many people we should let into this country or any of those sort of policy sorts of things, but here is a real estate investing show. I often think about where and how we're going to house all these immigrants, whether they come from Central America or South America or Israel or anywhere else. And I know oftentimes you've touted immigration's economic benefits. So I think it's pretty easy for one to see how in the short term immigrants could be of economic detriment. But tell us more about those long-term economic benefits of immigrants coming to the United States.
Immigrants come to the United States and become Americans and contribute American opportunity and wealth. We won the Second World War because of immigration of Jewish scientists from Europe to the United States, who led by people like John von Neumann and Oppenheimer, who forged the Manhattan Project. And that's really how we won the Second World War, was by accepting brilliant immigrants who wanted to serve America. Now, there is a threat today where immigrants come to the United States not to contribute to the United States, but to exploit the United States or even destroy it.
Not the go-givers.
They are givers. And so we want immigrants who are inclined to commit to America and create opportunities for the world, but immigrants who want to tear down America and who believe that America owes them something tend to be less productive and less valuable immigrants. And immigrants who really want to destroy Western civilization and the jihadists that we know about are actually a threat to America. So the immigration problem isn't simple, but when we had a system where legal immigrants could apply and enter our country and revitalize it, that was a wonderful system. But having hordes of illegal immigrants just pour over the border is not an intelligent way to deal with the desire of people around the world to share in American prosperity.
We've seen several cases in the past year or two where immigrants are given free housing. There are really great case studies about this in Massachusetts and some other places, how they're giving housing before oftentimes our own Americans, including sometimes retired veterans, are provided with housing. This all comes down to the housing crunch and already having a low housing supply. So what are some more of your thoughts about just how much of a leg up or a handout should we give new immigrants?
Housing technology is going to be transformed by the material science revolution that is epitomized by graphene, this miracle material I was describing. I think part of the problem is real estate enterprise is overregulated, and there are too many obstacles to the building of innovative new forms of housing. In 20 years, it'll be hard to recognize many of the structures that emerge as a result of real revolution in material science that is epitomized by this graphene age that I've been describing, and that also will transform electronics as well. And in part, housing can become a kind of computer platform, as Elon Musk is transforming the auto business by seeing Tesla is really a new form of computer platform. I believe there's going to be an Elon Musk of real estate who's going to re-envisage housing as a new form of building a computer platform that makes intelligent houses of the future that will be both cheaper and more commodious for human life.
Real estate is rather old and slow-moving. When we think about technology in real estate, maybe what comes to mind are smart thermostats, smart doorbells, or 3D printed homes. But when we come back, we're going to learn more about graphene and what it can do in real estate and the nanocosm revolution. Our guest is George Gilder. We talked about economics. We're coming back to talk about technology. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Hey, you can get your mortgage loans at the same place where I get mine, at Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They provided our listeners with more loans than any provider in the entire nation because they specialize in income properties. They help you build a long-term plan for growing your real estate empire with leverage. You can start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. Start now while it's on your mind at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's ridgelendinggroup.com. Your bank is getting rich off of you. The national average bank account pays less than 1% on your savings. If your money isn't making 4%, you're losing your hard-earned cash to inflation. Let the Liquidity Fund help you put your money to work with minimum risk. Your cash generates up to an 8% return with compound interest year in and year out instead of earning less than 1% sitting in your bank account. The minimum investment is just $25K. You keep getting paid until you decide you want your money back. Their decade-plus track record proves they've always paid their investors 100% in full and on time. And I would know because I'm an investor too. Earn 8%, hundreds of others are. Text FAMILY to 66866. Learn more about Freedom Family Investments Liquidity Fund on your journey to financial freedom through passive income. Text FAMILY to 66866.
This is the king of commercial real estate, Dolph DeRoos. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're joined by an illustrious, legendary guest, George Gilder, among being other things, including a prolific writer. He's also the former speechwriter to Presidents Reagan and Nixon. He's got a really illustrious and influential career. And George, you've been talking about graphene, something that I don't think our audience is very familiar with, and I'm not either. Tell us about graphene's promise in real estate.
Well, back in Manchester, England in 2004, graphene was first discovered and formulated. It actually has emerged before then, but the Nobel Prizes were awarded to Geim and Novoselov in 2010. So this is a new material that all of us know when we use a lead pencil. A lead is graphite, and graphene is a single layer of graphite. And it turns out many people imagined if you had a single layer of graphite, it would just break up. It would not be useful.
We're talking super thin, like an atom thick.
Yeah, it's an atom thick. But still, it turns out that it has miraculous properties, that it's 200 times stronger than steel. If you put it in a trampoline, you couldn't see the trampoline, but you could bounce on it without falling through it. It can stop bullets. It means you can have invisible and almost impalpable bulletproof vests. And you mix it with concrete, and the concrete becomes 35% stronger. Even parts per million of graphene can transform the tensile strength of concrete, greatly reduce the amount you need, and enable all sorts of new architectural shapes and capabilities. We really are in the beginning of a new technological age, and all depressionary talk you hear is really going to be eclipsed over the coming decades by the emergence of an array of new technologies. Graphene, for instance, is a perfect film on a wafer of silicon carbide and enable what's called terahertz electronics, which is trillions of cycles a second, like light, rather than billions of cycles a second, like our NVIDIA or silicon chips. And it really obviates chips because what it allows is what's called wafer scale integration of electronics. And today, the semiconductor industry, and I've written 10 books on semiconductors over the years, but the semiconductor industry functions by 12-inch wafers that get inscribed with all sorts of complex patterns that are a billionth of a meter in diameter, these big wafers. And then the wafers get cut up into thousands of little pieces that each one gets encapsulated in plastic packages and by some remote Asian islands, and then get implanted on printed circuit boards and arrayed in giant data centers that now can on track to consume half the world's energy over the next 20 years. And these new and all this technology is ultimately going to be displaced by wafer scale integration on the wafer itself. You can have a whole data center on a 12-inch wafer with no chips. It's on the wafer itself. And this has been recently announced in a paper from Georgia Tech by a great scientist named Gilder. And it's a thrilling revolution that renders much of Silicon Valley obsolescent and opens up just huge opportunities in construction and real estate and architecture and medicine and virtually across the range of contemporary industry.
You wrote a book about blockchain and how we're moving into the post-Google world is what you've called it. So is this graphene technology that you're discussing with us here, is that part of the next thing, which you're calling the nanocosm revolution?
The microcosm was an earlier book, The Quantum Revolution in Economics and Technology, I wrote years ago, called Microcosm.
Okay, we're getting smaller than microcosm now into nanocosm.
That was microns. That was millionths of a meter dimensions of the transistors and devices and silicon chips. The nanocosm is a billionth of a meter. It's 1,000 times smaller, the features and the electronics of the future. And we're moving from the microcosm into the nanocosm. New materials like graphene epitomize this transformation. You know, people think that these giant data centers all around the world, which are amazing structures, but half the energy in these data centers are devoted to removing the heat rather than fueling the computation. And I believe these data centers represent a kind of IBM mainframe of the current era. When I was coming up, people imagined that a few hundred IBM mainframe computers, each weighing about a ton, would satisfy all the world's needs for computation, and that new artificial minds could be created with these new IBM mainframes. And it's the same thing today, only we're talking about data centers. And I believe that the coming era will allow data centers in your pocket. And based on graphene electronics and wafer scale integration, a whole new paradigm that will make the current data centers look like obsolete old structures that need to be revitalized.
Around 2007, Americans in much of the world, they got used to how it feels to have the power of a computer in their pocket with devices like the iPhone. How would it change one's everyday life to have effectively a data center in their pocket?
This means that we no longer would be instruments of a few giant companies hearing a singular model of intelligence. That's what's currently envisaged, that Google Brain or Facebook or these giant data centers would sum up all human intelligence and in a particular definition. But there are now 8 billion human beings on Earth, and each of our minds is as densely connected as the entire global internet. And while the global internet and consumes terawatts, trillions of watts of power. Our brains, each of these 8 billion human minds, functions on 12 to 14 watts, or it's billions of times less than these data center systems on the internet. I believe that technology works to the extent that it expands human capabilities, not to the extent that it displaces human capabilities. The emergence of distributed databases in all our pockets, distributed knowledge and distributed creativity can revitalize the whole world economy and open new horizons that are hard to imagine today. As long as we don't all of a sudden decide that we live in a material universe where everything's scarce and successes by one person come at the expense of somebody else, as long as that zero-sum model doesn't prevail,
Right.
Human opportunities are really unlimited. Most of economics has been based on a false model of scarcity. The only thing that's really scarce is time. Imagination and creativity are really infinite.
Yes. Well, if someone wants to learn more about graphene and the nanocosm revolution, how can you help them? What should they do?
They can read my newsletters. I have a company with 4 newsletters. I write the Gilder Technology Report much of the time. I write, John Schroeder writes Moonshots, and I have a Gilder Private Reserve that reaches out with our crowd in Israel. And a lot of those graphene companies in Israel are part of our private reserve. And I do Gilder's guideposts, and those are all available. GetGilder.com.
If you'd like to learn more about George and his popular newsletter called the Gilder Technology Report, you can learn more about that at getgilder.com. George, it's been an enlightening conversation about economics and where society is moving next. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Keith. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, a forward-looking discussion with the great George Gilder. Forbes said graphene may be the next multi-trillion-dollar material. George will tell you that you want to get into graphene now while the biggest gains are still ahead. If it interests you in at least learning more, check out his video resource. It's free. There's also an opportunity for you to be an investor. You can do all of that and more at getgilder.com. Again, getgilder.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.